yesterday from the Trump administration is that President Trump was now open to meeting with Kim Jong-un, and they were attempting to broker some sort of meeting, maybe in Pyongyang, maybe in the middle of North Korea. It's possible. They're talking about the president doing this in May. Well, there are a few issues with this, and it's very interesting to watch as the right and the left split on this issue, because the left cheered when President Obama, you remember when he was Senator Obama in 2008, in a speech, he said that he would meet with the leaders of Iran, North Korea without preconditions. Right? He would meet with them without getting anything in return to even sit at the table with them. And a lot of people like me, said that's terrible. Why would you possibly do that? Because now you're giving legitimacy to evil regimes without them having to give up anything. And well, now President Trump seems to be doing some of the same sort of stuff, and people on the right are split. There are a bunch of people on the right who think this is just great, and a bunch of people on the right who think it kind of stinks. And then there are a bunch of folks on the left who celebrated when Obama said that. Oh, look at that. It's a new, open foreign policy. It's just going to be amazing. And now Trump's doing it, and they're confused. Are they supposed to be mad, or are they supposed to be happy? And so you're seeing this bizarre split in alliances among political allies and weird new alliances forming among political enemies, all about Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un. So first, we have to do a little bit of background here. So Kim Jong-un obviously is the dictator of the most repressive country on planet Earth. It is basically a giant gulag. Thousands of people are still in prison camps today under Kim Jong-un, and he has obviously been threatening the world with nuclear weapons. He's been test-firing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that are apparently capable of hitting the United States. He's been testing more and more powerful nuclear weapons. He's been threatening shipping lanes, and he's been using bellicose language toward South Korea. Now, what's weird is that South Korea has moved in the direction of appeasement. So they've elected their own sort of Neville Chamberlain figure. That would be the president of North Korea, whose name is Moon. And the president of North Korea is committed to what he calls a sunlight policy. The sunlight policy is a policy of détente with the North Koreans. President Moon Jae-in is actually the guy who conveyed Kim's supposed offer to meet to the Americans. His office said that North Korea, quote, has ample intention of holding talks with the United States. And he has another agenda here, which is that he is not particularly fond of the U.S. having a military presence in South Korea. Now, it is the U.S. military presence in South Korea that essentially guarantees there's not another Korean War. It's the American presence in South Korea that guarantees that North Korea, maybe with Chinese support, doesn't walk across that 38th parallel and just walk right into the heart of Seoul. Because the fact is that the United States has a trigger mechanism in foreign policy. We have a trigger mechanism, meaning that we have a certain number of troops that are along the border. And if that border were to be breached, the United States would immediately be enmeshed in a war with the North Koreans. The North Koreans know that, and they know the minute they step over the border, the United States comes in and eviscerates them, and that's the end of that war. If the United States were to remove support from the South Koreans, the calculus would change very quickly, and at the very least, the North Koreans and the Chinese could pressure the South Koreans for all sorts of concessions. They could push them into their own sphere of influence on trade, on defense. It could get very ugly very quickly without the U.S. continuing to be there and allying with the South Koreans on a military level. But the current regime in South Korea, the current administration in South Korea, is not real fond of that. They don't want the United States deploying anti-missile technology in South Korea. They don't want the United States deploying troops in South Korea. And so they're honestly sort of working on behalf of the North Koreans to make a move that would push the United States out to the fringe on South Korean ground. So all of that is the background. Of course, Trump has been using very bellicose language with regard to the North Koreans. The North Koreans have been using bellicose language with regard to Trump. They've basically been tweeting at each other. Trump tweeted that he has a bigger button than Kim Jong-un, which is obviously true. And Kim Jong-un has said that the United States will bathe in fire and all this kind of stuff. And so the talking point for people who are big Trump fans is that Trump forced the North Koreans to the table with all of this language. That Trump showed he wasn't going to budge, and now the North Koreans are going to come to the table and they're going to cave. That seems unlikely to me. It seems more like this is a calculated ploy by the North Koreans to gain concessions from the West in exchange for an empty promise. The reason I say this is because this has been the North Korean way of doing business for nigh on 60 years at this point. They've constantly threatened the West. They've constantly gotten concessions. They've constantly gotten cash and food and even nuclear help under the 1994 framework North Korea negotiated by Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter. Under all of that, the North Koreans have always gained and the West has always lost. The North Koreans have never felt the need to give up their nuclear program. They've continued to progress their nuclear program, even as we continue to sign checks to them. So this all started yesterday with the South Korean security advisor, Chung Yu-yong. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he said that North Korea is now committed to denuclearization. I'll explain what he means by this in a second, because if you read the headline, that sounds great. North Korea is going to get rid of its nukes. If you know what he means, it's not that great. Here's what he had to say.
I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests. He understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue.
Okay, so basically that's the South Korean government saying, well, Kim said he's not going to fire any more ICBMs or test any more missiles. Well, we're not super worried about the test at this point. We're worried about the continued development of the technology because he can restart the test anytime he wants. A promise to stop tests so that he can get in the room with Trump and get a picture walking out with Trump and show his own people that he is a powerful leader on par with Trump is fine with him. I mean, if that means 6 weeks of refraining from firing missiles, he can probably handle that. Remember, it's already the middle of March. May is coming up really quickly. So all he has to, so basically he's promised that for the next 6 weeks he won't fire a missile. Whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo. When he says that North Korea is committed to denuclearization, understand the absolute stated program of the North Korean government is we want denuclearization of the entire peninsula. What that means is we want the United States to remove its troops from South Korea. So we'll get rid of our nuclear program if and only if the United States removes its troops from South Korea and the United States stops engaging in military exercises with the South Koreans. I think that Kim wants to make that pitch directly to Trump. He wants to say, listen, we can walk out of here with the greatest deal. You'll win the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? We'll walk out of here and you'll have been the guy who disarmed the Kim regime and I'll have been the guy who allowed the Korean Peninsula to finally stand up on its own. He can make a nationalist appeal to Trump. And it would be a bad move by Trump because, again, if the United States does not have troops in South Korea, this radically changes the situation on the ground, not only militarily, but in terms of economics and trade, in terms of foreign policy, spheres of influence, protection of particular trade corridors. Right? All of this goes in by the wayside if the United States were to pull its troops out of South Korea, which is why we've never really considered it before. It's possible, however, that Trump falls for that routine. So the question in Trump meeting with North Korea is this Trump and Gorbachev, right? Is this Reagan and Gorbachev, where Reagan basically strong-arms Gorbachev and refuses to make concessions to Gorbachev? Or is this Nixon to China? Is this Trump goes to the North Koreans and the North Koreans lie to him and then he buys it because now he's going to get a political win out of it? Well, it certainly sounds like Trump is very positive about all of this. He sees this as a big win. Here's Trump talking about North Korea acting very positively all of a sudden.
We're going to see. They seem to be acting positively, but we're going to see. We'll know, and I'm willing to go, as you probably noticed this morning, where we sent out through social media a statement, willing to go either way. Hopefully, it's going to be the proper way. The proper way is the way that everybody knows and everybody wants.
Okay, so this is all very nice and very happy-dappy-do. He tweeted something out similar yesterday about North Koreans. He said, great progress is being made. He said, Kim Jong-un talked about denuclearization with the South Korean representatives, not just to freeze. Also, no missile testing by North Korea during this period of time. Great progress being made, but sanctions will remain until an agreement is reached. Meeting being planned. Okay, so he sounds very positive about all of this. And the way that Trump fans are playing this is that Trump has won, right? The little rocket man blinked. This is what Sean Hannity says, that Trump has shellacked Kim Jong-un into surrender. Of course, this is what Sean is going to say. Sean is a big Trump fan. Obviously, he thinks everything Trump does is a work of magnificent genius. Here was his take.
Major breaking news tonight, a huge foreign policy win for President Trump. Little rocket man blinks. Now, the president's tough rhetoric, his bold action, his severe sanctions, they appear to be working tonight. President Trump is accepting an invitation to meet with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un by May, and Pyongyang is agreeing to stop all nuclear and missile tests while these talks are underway, and the sanctions, they will continue. Okay,
that is not exactly the correct take, I think. I think the idea that there is a big blink here by Kim, the question is, what is Kim giving up? And the answer is nothing. Right? Kim is giving up nothing, and he's going to get a picture with Trump walking out arm in arm, hands outraised, right, like Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler. And that's a real possibility. The question here is, are those fabled negotiation skills of Trump so magical? Is he really going to be able to get into a room with Kim and then get Kim to denuclearize and we retain all of our troops there? We still have sanctions that snap back into place if something should go wrong. We still have verifiability of their denuclearization. Are all those things really going to happen? Do you think they're really going to happen? Because I'm very skeptical they're going to happen. I'm very skeptical the Kim regime is going to give up all of that just because Trump tweeted some nasty things about Kim. It doesn't make any real politic sense. Like, play Kim for a second. Get yourself out of the American political context and play Kim for a second. If you were the Kim regime, how exactly would you play this? Well, I'll explain what you would do if you were the Kim regime and why I'm so skeptical that anything is going to come out of this that's positive for the United States in just a second. Imagine that you are Kim Jong-un for a second. Let's get out of Trump's head. We spend so much time in American politics in the head of Donald Trump, which is a weird place. Let's be real. It's kind of a weird place. An even weirder place is the Kim regime. But I'm not convinced, and I've never been convinced, that the Kim regime is crazy. I've never been convinced that Kim Jong-un is a crazy guy. It seems to me that he is a person who is out for self-preservation and preservation of his evil regime. Now, if you are him, and you are looking around, if you were he, and you were looking around at the world, and you were thinking to yourself, how can I ensure that I maintain power and that I stay in power for the rest of my life? The first thing you would do is develop nuclear weapons. Right? That is the very first thing that you would do, because that would ensure that there is a deterrent. That should the United States attack you, you threaten to nuke Seoul, and that's the end of it. Right? You get to stay, because no one wants Seoul nuked. No one wants 100,000 people dead in the middle of Seoul, even if it means liberating the North Korean people who've been subjugated for decades on end. So you want your nuclear weapons. But what you also want is economic support from the West. You want them signing checks to you. And so what you do is every so often, you offer to give up your nuclear weapons, and you say, we'll give those things right up. We'll make concessions to you. Just sign us some checks. Remove the sanctions, sign us some checks. We won't do any testing. We won't fire missiles. We won't test our bombs. And then you spend the next 3 years in the bunker developing new weapons. And then 3 years later, you come out and you do the same routine. And there are new sanctions, another round of sanctions, and you've shown the world that you're strong and that they're deterred. That's the way this logic works. It's not illogical what Kim is doing. It's not. I mean, threatening the United States sounds illogical. It's not illogical, because the whole point of him threatening the United States is to prevent the United States from invading his country and sacking him, or prevent the North Koreans themselves from sacking him. Right? That's the whole point here. So why does he want to meet with Trump? Because again,